Oh my god, this week. Oh, this week's been heck, guys. Oh man, this week. I tell you. This week, things kind of went crazy this week. I'm probably going to have to make like 2 videos. I'm going to do as many videos as I can before the sun goes down. Because, holy crow, look at all this freaking news. Now, of course, I'm going to lead off on this Sunday one with the biggest news story of the week, which is one that made, as Purple on Twitter call it, as the furries on Twitter call it, real news. As in, not Flera and not Dogpatch Press, because apparently, we're not real news, man. It's only okay. Oh, it's only when the humans talk about us that it's real news. Okay, I get it. I see how it is. Anyways, that facetiousness aside. So before we begin, I'm going to start off with talking about, a little bit of my history, or at least a little bit of a side thing, but it was interesting anyway. So one of the first videos I have on this channel while I'm talking in fursuit is called Furries Sans Fursuit, which you can see up there in the title click bars. In it, I talk about the concept of furries being critical of news media, talking about furries being mostly about fursuiting and having the act of fursuiting being kind of the main staple of the fandom, when only like 15 to 20% of the fandom at the most owns a fursuit. I should say 15 to 20% of convention-going furries own that, and I talk more about it there. In it, I make a reference to the first time I kind of heard this argument, and that was when I was living in New Jersey with a furry roommate who was, came down and we roomed for about a few months, and it was I showed him this thing, which I thought was a pretty positive representation of the furry fandom for a news organization, particularly from the mainstream news organizations. And it happened to be Rachel Maddow. The Rachel Maddow show did a little expose, and hey, I found the transcript for that show. It's finally, I didn't find it when I made the original video, but I found it finally. It's in the description below, and you can read the transcript of that particular episode. And she covered, a recent convention that was going to be starting up, or a recent convention that was going to be, going in Denver. And in it, she talked about, what furries are and all this stuff. And my friend, of course, was like, they focus a little too much on the fursuits. And and that was sort of where that critique sort of came from, and why it was kind of that little story was included in that particular video. So what does this have to do with the topic at hand? Well, like Rachel Maddow, I'm pulling a Rachel Maddow. I'm giving you a somewhat seemingly non-sequestery history news bit about history and its ties with things, that sort of is tangential to the topic, but not really about the topic at hand before I get to the nitty-gritty. But I'll talk to you about it right after these messages. Okay, we're back. All right, so what does this have to do with anything? Well, the convention that she was covering in Denver was obviously Rocky Mountain Fur Con. And little could me or my roommate know at the time of watching this little expose of Rachel Maddow talking about the Rocky Mountain Fur Con that particular convention would run into a very big controversy about 8 years later that would eventually lead to its downfall and its closure. And that there was some really weird folks behind the scenes in some high positions of power there. So let's go over what happened, because there's a lot of stuff to go over, so this video is probably going to be one of my longer ones, probably 45 minutes to an hour range. So if you don't want to sit through something like this, I would suggest, if you want to read it, my favorite one of the furry non-news press covering it, which a lot of non-furry news press has covered it, obviously the local Denver things. There's the Sun and the the New York Daily, which I don't recommend because theirs is very small and blurbish. There's the Rolling Stone, which covers the angle from the furry raiders sort of perspective. There's the AV Club. There's There's an Australian news site. There's a lot of places, but the favorite one that I think took everything and sort of put it in a great sequential order and sort of covered most of the bases and did a very good job at what they do, is the Daily Beast. So I would highly recommend, if you want to read through it and read through all this stuff without me blabbing at you, go ahead and go there and read that. But for those of you who came to see me blab about it, let's get started. So the issue here started really with a group called the Furry Raiders. Now the Furry Raiders weren't very well known in the fandom until Rocky Mountain Fur Con 2016 was coming around. During the startup of that particular convention, something very weird happened. People were trying to get rooms, and they were very short rooms for some reason, and they couldn't really get them very easily. The reason being is that a group called the Furry Raiders was buying rooms in the block. So for those of you who don't know how furry conventions work, basically the convention will work together with the hotel to reserve a block of rooms, so a certain percentage of the hotel's rooms, in order to sell them on their convention website at a discounted rate to people who are attending the convention. This helps bring more people in. It's a win sort of situation for the hotel because more people are buying stuff from the hotel and all that stuff. It sort of helps stimulate the hotel's economy. They don't ever usually block out the entire hotel because you need rooms for people who are actually traveling on business affairs and other things. So usually it's a pretty good sized chunk of the hotel rooms that get blocked for conventions, but not the entire thing. But that little trivia aside, basically of those blocked rooms, this group called the Furry Raiders raided. See what I did there? Raided the blocked rooms and took a percentage for themselves. A handful of people, basically bought a half, like many rooms. There's I heard figures of 12 to 20% of the room block they bought for themselves, and were basically handing out to furries. Now, as I mentioned in a previous thing, is if you take furries, they go, what do you want from me? You know, when you give them compliments or things for free, and particularly in a capitalist society. Capitalist societies like the United States, we very much see financial transactions as part of our culture. So when someone says, I'm going to give you something for free, the thing in the back of most people in a capitalist society's mind is, what is the cost? And so people started to research this Furry Raiders group. And this is what they found. Where are we? Armband. You. So they found this guy. So they found this was sort of their logo that they kind of chose to represent themselves, and they wore it sort of in an armband fashion. To those of you who are not even historic buffs, but just kind of have general knowledge on world history, you kind of can see why people started to go, So you have like a maroon, brownish red sort of color surrounded by having a white circle in it and then a black emblem in the middle of that circle. And they wear them as armbands. No. So I also did research on this group because I was thinking about writing a news story about the whole convention block issue. Of course, Flare had its own issues at that time, so the organization that I would write news articles for was sort of down at the time. Like, we had lost some editors and all that stuff. That's a whole other can of worms and another story that you can see on another video if you go back in my channel that talks about that situation. But basically, that's what occurred. So I was like, I'm not going to bother writing it because it's not going to get published at this time. So I didn't really bother doing it. But I did research them. So I did find the group leaders' FA account and stuff like that, and it raised a little bit of flags. Not just the armband thing, which they, right now they're claiming innocence. Like whenever if you read the best way to go about this one is to read the Rolling Stone article about the history of the Furry Raiders, because they do a little expose on this person. His first name goes by the name Foxler, which doesn't help things. And of course, he's claiming, well, it's a mix of Fox and Miller, and not Fox and Hitler. We'll go over that a little bit later on my thoughts. But for now, what I found is when I was doing research on this guy, I found his Fur Affinity account, and I saw that he had his age set up in a weird thing. It had 128 as his age at the time when I was researching it. If you look at it today, it's a pure 29. But back when the room block thing was happening, it was 128, which is very weird to me. So I subtracted that from the current date, and then I looked at Hitler's birthday, and lo and behold, a match. And then it's like, okay, all these squares sort of make a circle. It's like the Furry Raiders are claiming they're not, playing with like Nazi symbolism or doing all that stuff, but research shows that it's like they're not helping themselves if they're trying not to be connected with that particular group. Of course, they say they promote equality and stuff like that. Foxler himself is apparently somebody of a mixed race and is gay and has a black boyfriend and stuff like that. That's what they're claiming. So basically, when it comes to neo-Nazis, he wouldn't be really seen as one by actual freaking neo-Nazis who, are all about the Aryan race kind of stuff. So, but as I said, we'll go over a little bit more on that particular thing. So people found out about this group, and now they were labeled neo-Nazis based on the attire and how they presented themselves to the world. They were given that label, so they're seen as a neo-Nazi group within the fandom. Comparatively, and by fandom standards, they are neo-Nazis because they're presenting that particular aspect of themselves that way. Then the election of November 2016 happened, and people who are liberal leaning all of a sudden are becoming more militant because of the victories of Donald Trump, who is seen as very bombastic, very sort of tyrannical and authoritarian in his actions to many on the left. So a sort of a new group has sort of come along called the Antifa, which is ironic because Fur Affinity, it has nothing to do with being against Fur Affinity. Anti-FA means anti-fascism. So they will use whatever means necessary to demote fascism and to try and prevent them from being on. There are some violent sects of this particular movement which also contrive their own sort of controversy and a lot of people say they have ties with fascio-communism, which gives its own little bag of worms. So basically, a tyrant hates another tyrant, they're going to fight. So that led to this particular little incident, which kind of began to be the end. Donald Trump got inaugurated in late January, and not too far after that, somebody who was a part of the alt-right movement by the name of Richard, I don't know his last name, so I'll call him Richard B. I know his last name starts with a B. I'm not good with names, you'll have to forgive me. But this Richard B. guy, in his fancy little haircut and his suit and his little Pepe Le Pew pin, was talking to somebody about the Pepe Le Pew pin and what it stands for and blah, blah, blah. Socio memes on the internet. And somebody came around and decked him in the face. He's being questioned about having the alt-right having ties with Nazi sort of ideals. And, of course, somebody came around and decked him in the schnoz and then ran off. And so it became a whole little debate on the internet about that kind of a thing. So now we go into the next thing, which is where Dale comes into play. Dale. Nazis cry now, they want to go home. He's a day. Oh. It's 6, Nazi 7, Nazi 8, Nazi punch. I'm being facetious, guys. I like song parodies. I do that on my channel too. But let's get back to a serious face. All right, so basically this is kind of the thing that happened here. This is kind of a famous little thread that's on a lot of these articles that kind of show what was sort of the catalyst of the escalation here. So right around after the time that this punching happened and Trump's inauguration happened, this particular fur up here who has the Antifa symbol, which is the circle with the 3 arrows pointing down on their logo, said, you remember that this neo-Nazi group called the Furry Raiders is going to be at Rocky Mountain Fur Con, so be wary and be cautious. And, dealing with the tongue-in-cheek of the current events, Deo responded with, "I can't wait to deck him in the schnoz." And then somebody responded to that with, "Well, I can't wait for them to pull up, the person you deck in the schnoz to pull out a gun and blow you away." I can't read it quote word for word because my fursuit, these glasses don't work with a darn with this suit on, but that's basically what happened here. And so then it was like, whoa, that escalated quickly. So do you really plan on bringing a firearm to the convention? And then, that whole little thing happened. Deo reported this particular Twitter user to Twitter. Twitter banned the particular user. Rocky Mountain Fur Con. The problem is we don't really know who this user is actually as a furry. They kind of came out of nowhere. I don't really know who they are. I don't know what their ties are with the furry raiders, etc. But in essence, it's hard to tell where they came from or if they had any ties with the furry raiders or whatnot. But obviously they're very pro defense and to the point where it's dude, just how dishonorable do you have to be to threaten to shoot someone for punching you in the face? Just take the punch in the face and deal with it, or just punch him back. You know what I mean? Jeez. But anyways, that's a whole other can of worms. Bringing firearms to a fist fight is disgusting. Sorry, but that's the kangaroo coming out in me. You know what I mean? It's kangaroos. We have boxing matches all the time. It's we don't go, "Oh man, you decked me in the schnoz. I'm gonna reach in my pouch and bring out a Glock. Turn it sideways. It's a kill shot." It's freaking stupid. Anyways, trying to keep it non-opinion oriented here, but it's leaking. So here's that. So basically, Deo, I did get a thing from her where I asked her, it's did you contact the hotel? Because at the end of the day, they claim that she contacted the hotel or the cops. Our Rocky Mountain Fur, staff and the news around it seems to suggest that Deo reported this to the hotel. Deo says she did not, but somebody must have. Somebody could have seen this and felt concerned about violence happening at the convention, and then presented it to either the hotel or the cops of the local area. And the cops went to the hotel. See, this is speculation from what people have heard from the convention staff. The cops went to the hotel, said we need to be here during the weekend to make sure things are good and secure, but we need to pay us for that. And then the hotel tried to pass that charge on to the convention about a month ago, according to one of the sources in the convention. That I think his name was Zachary. He told the Australian News, it's about a month ago we received this $20,000 charge that was going to be made to us in order to have our convention there, to hire police officers in order to have our convention be secure. So they were dealing with that for about a month, trying to negotiate with the hotel and all that. In the meanwhile, they wanted to send out their quote-unquote first ban, according to their leadership, that they were proud to be a convention that never banned anyone for any reason, and they were going to send out their first ban. So they had the member of a leadership of the financing group called the Mid-Atlantic something or other, that it's called the MAC, the MAAAC, which oversees the Rocky Mountain Fur Con. A lot of furry conventions have this sort of overreaching corporation that sort of does all the back-end business stuff while the people on the board of the convention just worry about the convention. I think the Anthrocon is North Atlantic something or other. I'm supposed to be an expert on these things, and I don't know the names. I hate names. I'm sorry. I'm terrible at names. But anyways, so they were well, we're going to ban this Deo person because her little tweet led to this escalation and blah, blah, blah. Of course, I don't know if they ever wanted to, remove the other party from that, but more on that later. So the one person sent a letter to them removing them from the convention, but they took it one step too far. They took it a little more than one step too far. Okay, so let's go over this thing. So this Monday, and this is kind of what led to the sort of big firestorm coming out of this whole thing. And this was led by Dogpatch Press that released this article with and Deo released it to them and probably released it herself as well. This letter was the thing that was sent by the leader of the MAC, of the return of the MAC. And that person's name was Kendall Emery. Kendall Emery. Of course, Kendall Emery has a history of being on the staff of our MFC and sort of resigned and kind of went into the shadows after, in 2008, a criminal act he was charged with in 1993 came out, where predatory things on a child, unfortunately. But that was but as many people said, that's 1993. That was a long time ago. And so, he served his time and did everything and stuff like that. So that shouldn't really be any relationship to this particular issue. But the issue here is that whatever happened, whenever he was charged in 1993, it must have left a bad taste in his mouth about the judicial and the judicial and justice system of the United States, because what people found, Deo took this letter, which basically threatened her with a cease and desist and threatened her property and everything else. It basically threatened to lien on her property. She kept, going after Rocky Mountain Fur Con and all this stuff. And so Deo, and they said, you need to respond to this letter and blah, blah, blah. You can read the full thing. Deo went to an actual lawyer to read over it. And because she did that, she found out that this particular group, that red thumbprint at the very bottom of the letter, has to do with a group called the Sovereign Citizens Movement. The Sovereign Citizens Movement is apparently a radical group which believes that every individual is their own government, and they recognize no state or federal governments at all in any sense of the thing. Every individual is the law unto themselves. And if they use the fancy legal language of a lawyer, they can get whatever they want if they do it properly and well. It's sort of like they believe it's some sort of magical incantation where you sprinkle some magic words and everything comes to be. So when the press, of course, pressed him on this particular thing, when the mainstream press, most of his responses were, well, no, it's that thumbprint really means nothing. It has nothing to do with my philosophical beliefs. It's just my imprint to say that I signed the thing. But there's a problem here. And that is that it's not just the thumbprint. Deo's lawyer said the language and the thumbprint matches. And not only that, we have a third-party lawyer who, when this thing went out in the open, became an instant little fandom folk hero named the Boozy Barrister, who read this particular letter and went, yes, this guy is a sovcit. Sovcit is the short term of a sovereign citizen that lawyers have to deal with on such a regular basis that they shorten the term to sovcit. So, who is the Boozy Badger? Oh man, I think this is the most fun part of the frickin' story, in my opinion. And dude, we need fun parts of stories like this because it just makes my head hurt. But this little artwork is done by Cookie Shark. You can see her Twitter in the description below. So basically, he's actually not a furry. Okay, so let me just put that out straight out. At the end of his article that he wrote, which is also in the description below, which I highly recommend you read. It's freaking hilarious, and it's awesome, and it breaks down the letter in just the most snarkiest and fun tones, but also kind of has snark and fun in our behest too. And Furry's like self-deprecating humor that's in good spirits. We love that stuff. We love it. If it's in good spirits and it's snarky and it's great. We like tongue-in-cheek humor at our own expense. We know we're silly, and that article was just was beautiful. It was mwah. So he said at the end of that article, it's like, if I was going to choose a persona, I would be a badger. Which, for one, he's a lawyer, so that's freaking hilarious. Stop badgering the witness. It's like, somebody made that joke at him, and he's like, oh God, people, no. What are you doing? Goading the witness. That's an Animaniacs reference. So people started drawing fan art of this particular guy. And this is just one example. There's a lot of examples, and he kept retweeting it on his Twitter account. His name is the Boozy Barrister, and now he's the Boozy Barrister Badger, which is alliteration, which is freaking awesome. And not only that, there was another fun little side story here where not only this guy apparently had a furry friend in high school that he learned was a furry after after the guy learned that it was that his friend, the Boozy Barrister, which he probably knew as the Boozy Barrister, was now the Boozy Barrister Badger, and he's like, "Are you serious? I've been in the fandom for 20 years, and I'm trying to get some sort of break where I'm some popular folk hero, and you do it in 24 hours." And he's like, "You didn't try hard enough, man. You just didn't try hard." And so they're having this little fun ribbon back and forth. It is the most hilarious thing. And it's a very awesome thing. And also, it sounds like he might want to attend Anthrocon this year because him and Kage and him were like, "Yeah, you in?" He's like, "Yeah, I might be in." So, silver lining in things of sour grapes. But so basically, he tore this letter apart, saying, "Yeah, this is a soft sit letter." Now, for one, I believe him because, one, this lawyer, who was the Boozy Barrister, has no skin in this game. He's not in the anti-furries. He's not in this. He's not in any of our cliques. He's not even a furry. So he has no skin in the game. He is a lawyer. And this is where number 2 comes into play. And this is kind of where I'm going to have to go into sort of some more metaphorical talk. I'm sure a lot of furries out there have worked in the service industry. All right? You when you're behind that cash register, you know exactly who the people who've worked in the service industry are and who they aren't. You know when people, have come at you with this sort of high pomp and circumstance, believing that they could do a better job and that your job is completely the easiest thing in the world to do, and since you're not kowtowing to every single one of their whims, you're terrible at your job and all this kind of a stuff. When you're dealing with people like that, it's either going to be the best thing in your life or the worst thing in your life. And that's sort of what the lawyer here says when they're dealing with soft-sit people, with sovereign citizen people, is that you're either going to have a really good time or you're going to have a really bad time when dealing with these people. Because they're sort of because they come at you in that way. Similarly to the people who will come at you as a service clerk and they go, "Well, you're stupid." You're either going to have somebody who's going to make your day because of how stupid they're acting, and every one of your coworkers and you are just going to have a few beers and laugh about it later, or you're going to deal with somebody who's actually going to get your manager and is going to be a real threat to your job and just be really stupid. So, it's kind of like one of those situations. And because I really trust that that's the fact. So it's not just about a thumbprint that this guy has ties with this particular group of sovereign citizens. And it makes sense because you think about people and their motives to join certain causes and things. You got to think about why people join certain things and causes. Now, this guy was convicted in 1993 of child endangerment and sexual crimes. And they were convicted of such. So no doubt this person has been told over his life, "Well, you shouldn't have been charged for that," by some of his circle of friends and all that stuff. And he's like, "Yeah, you're right. I should, the justice system is unjust. I want to stand up against the justice system." It makes sense that somebody who's been convicted of a crime like that and felt like they got the short end of a stick, which it does sound like through his friends, he does feel that way, would join a group that basically says, "We are the law. We don't trust the law. We are the law." So, to me, it just seems like their declining of not being part of the sovereign citizen sort of thing is laughable because it's been disproven and there's motive and all this other stuff that lines up just too well in order to do that. But speaking of lining up, let's go over the last angle, which is in this trifecta of things happening. The threat of violence causing the hotel to give them money, to ask them to give them more money for security, between the leadership in their sort of business organization, seemingly having ties with the extremist group of the sovereign citizens. there was a final angle that was coming around on Monday night. At Flera, Lamar was working on a news article as soon as I got home, and Dogpatch sort of printed out their thing on Monday morning. At Monday afternoon, Eastern time, I was dealing with an article that was being presented, and that was, that article was about tax issues that the convention seems to have. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is sort of the third item that came up for this trifecta that kind of was in combination the end of Rocky Mountain Fur Con. So Lamar, while I was at work and doing my actual job, was following a lead based upon, and I wouldn't have thought of this, so I think he did a great job on figuring this out. But he was following a lead that the organization was presenting themselves as sort of a nonprofit on the federal level. And nonprofits have certain tax laws they have to abide by and follow. So when researching that, and probably, I don't know what led him down that road. It's probably because these individuals were sovereign citizens, and it was presented that they were sovereign citizens. And sovereign citizens, like most anti-government sort of organizations, kind of if they don't feel the law of the land applies to them, unless they feel it applies, then taxes are kind of a law that they would be like, no, it's not. This doesn't apply to us. We're sovereign citizens. We don't have to pay. We don't have to do all this tax loophole stuff and all that stuff. So that's probably the lead that they were following. I don't know why they were following that lead, but they followed that lead, and they found that they had their nonprofit federal tax exemption status removed from them back in 2011 for not properly filing things correctly and stuff like that, apparently. So, I'm not a tax expert myself, but that's kind of what I'm reading off of this. So, in essence, their Twitter account had on it that they were a nonprofit under that particular law, and they actually kind of weren't. So there was that issue. And so Lamar, was talking with Zachary, the person on the board, I believe Zachary was their name, about this particular issue. And he said, well, I'm going to print this out. And while we were editing it at Flera, that's when, Lamar learned through them that it's like, okay, we're just going to cancel the convention. So the article, which was printed out on Flera about, it being canceled and, everything else like that, started off as just talking about the neo-Nazi thing and the tax issues, but not really about the cancellation, because at the time it wasn't canceled. But during their conversations, it came up that, yeah, they're canceling. It was a combination of those probably three things in some percentage. The fact that the hotel was worried about security and thus trying to pass the cost off to the convention, which couldn't really afford it. The tax question area, where there's questionable things going on with their taxes, which the IRS may or may not investigate, or maybe there's no issue and they've already dealt with it, as they claim. But that is a question. And then there's the third thing about the leadership. There's these little rumors going around that there is this sort of disparity between some of the people on Rocky Mountain Fur staff and some of the leadership on the overhead MAC group that led to contentions, and probably because the leader seems to be part of this sovereign citizen movement, and so is pretty authoritarian in the way they act and stuff like that. So there's probably some disparities there. So between all those three things happening, here we are today. The very convention that Rachel Maddow talked about in 2008, that I talked about in the first video that I had, Rocky Mountain Fur Con, is no longer a convention. They canceled their event this year. It's very, very likely that they will never continue any convention events. There's already news about other conventions in the Denver area going to be starting out, and that's a good thing, and I hope that they get off the ground and that they get good leadership that will keep the interests of all attendees in their mind. And I'm gonna get the hop out of here for now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this video was informative. I'll have a bunch of source links in the links below. Go ahead and kick that like, kick the subscribes, kick a comment in the comment section how you feel about the whole situation. I'm sure it's going to be very controversial. It's blown up on Flare. It's like 200 and something comments in like a week, which is insane. Our highest articles are like 400 comments ever. So it's quite a controversial topic already. So, you know, people who are against the anti-FA people are, and so they're basically tying in they're concentrating on the politics more than just the convention, but, you know, that's what politics is. You know, we talk about our beliefs and our philosophies on life, and I'll probably talk about that on a future video here, if warranted. Thank you very much for watching, though. I'll gotta get the hop out of here. Thanks.